on the far path. Over to you, Hugh. Please proceed.
Thank you, Roy. So welcome everyone. I think we have, last time I looked, we had about 34 attendees here, which is really good. This is our first time trying to do this. So just bear with us if there's any sort of technical hiccups. I am recording this as well, so that we can play it back later on, and maybe for anybody who couldn't get through on the various technical barriers. So the title of the talk is called A Fatal Affray in the Far Pass, and the subtitle is A Toast to Charles Brownlow or A Toast to William Verner. Okay. Now, there may be some people who have not seen the pass for a while, so I'm just going to start off by just reminding ourselves, where is the Far Pass? So what we have here is a satellite view of Poyntzpass, and you can see on the left we have the main village, and on the right we have the Far Pass. And you can see here that the village is actually dissected by the canal and also dissected by the railway. So there is a sort of an east and west split. So if we're looking for the Far Pass, well, that is it. Now, this incident, this affray in the Far Pass took place in the year 1828. And in the year 1828, Poyntzpass was only 44 years old. But the Far Pass is much older. The Far Pass was originally called Fenwick's Pass, after the soldier that managed the castle that guarded the pass between County Down on this side and County Armagh on this side. So the castle we know was situated somewhere here in the Far Pass, and it was the soldier, and it was somebody called Fenwick. So that is why people talk about the Far Pass. Maybe because it is distinct. It existed before Poyntzpass, and there is that sort of dissection between the two parts. Now, the incident that I'm going to talk about took place in a public house. So let's just see where that public house is. Oh, hang on, it's gone. Where's the public house? Somebody knocked it down. Somebody knocked down the public house and built then the Poyntzpass Baptist Church, where the public house was. But if I go back a few years, there is the public house. So everyone probably recognizes Clark's old hardware store. And I remember getting in here and meeting Henry Clark, coming home from school, maybe buying some sweets from a big jar, or maybe my dad sending me in there to buy some nails on a Saturday. But so you can see the coal yard, the shop, the public house would have been over here. You've got the warehouses at the back, and you can see the railway and the railway crossing on the right. That's about 2011, that photograph was taken. If I go back even further to the start of the 20th century, we can see here what the public house would have looked like around the time the incident happened in 1828. So we can see here in the foreground, you've got the canal, we've got the humpback bridge, which was removed in the 1950s. On the left, here we've got the Orange Hall, and then we've got the Clark's or Sea Rights, as it was then, the coal yard and the public house. And you can see here some gentlemen in their hats have they've an appointment in the public house, I guess, to wet their whistle. So that's what the public house would have looked like, and yes, they would have travelled obviously not by car, but by horse and cart and foot. So, if we just look at the map of Poyntzpass, this map was made in 1830, and it gives you an idea of what life would have been like in Poyntzpass at the time that the incident took place. So we can see here, there's the main centre of Poyntzpass as it is today, and the main street is what's called. And then this road out here to Rathfriland and Lochbrickland, and we've got the canal here dissecting the village. So we can see here this L shape is the public house and the warehouses. Okay, and in 1830 these were owned by James Wigham. Okay, And if you get back up the street, then you can see here some of the houses that still exist today. Like there's where the railway bar is, and here would be the pharmacy. Okay. Now you can see some houses here which aren't here today, because you might see here that it says here the Great Northern Railway. In 1830, the railway did not exist. So what you're looking at here is some houses that are going to be demolished whenever the railway is built. So it's unfortunate for these people. So that is the situation in 1828. And let me just check here. This map was actually drawn by Maxwell Close of Drumbanner House, and the actual public house here is probably about 88 years old, because it was built at the time of the canal was built. So the village was 44 years old. The public house was about 88 years old. And I guess on Christmas, hang on a second, on Christmas Day, when this incident took place in 1828, the patrons in the public house would have been talking things like what did Santa Claus bring you? Were maybe asking, maybe some farmers were asking for another daughter's hand in marriage, and maybe dowries are being discussed, and maybe some of the landowners were asking each other, have you been contacted by the Great Northern Railway? Because some people were going to lose their land, some people were going to make some money out of it, some people were going to lose some land, maybe lose their livelihood. So all those sort of things would have been talked about in the public house on Christmas Day in 1828. And of course, like every other century, there would have been talk about politics as well in the public house. So I want to talk a little bit about the politics of the time, just to give you a bit of a background to what was happening in 1828. So now some of you recognise that face, Daniel O'Connell. He does look a bit like Seamus Daly, my brother, if Seamus put on a bit of weight. But the 1820s was a very turbulent time in Irish politics, and Daniel O'Connell was leading a campaign for Catholic emancipation that would enable Catholics to sit in Parliament in Westminster. Now, in 1823, he formed the Irish Catholic Association with the aim of adopting peaceful measures to obtain Catholic emancipation. Now, Protestants feared that this could mean the end of the Protestant ascendancy and the Protestant crown. And this was particularly the case in County Armagh, where the Orange Order held a lot of influence. But that was what Daniel O'Connell was doing on a sort of on a national level. On a more local level in County Armagh, there were two key characters involved here. Now, on the left we have Charles Brownlow from Lurgan, and on the right we have William Verner from Churchill in North Armagh. And these were two political leaders, and I'll just go through the sort of the timeline in 1828 as to what happened in the build-up to Christmas Day in 1828. In 1824, Charles Brownlow, who at the time was a very, very staunch member of the Orange Order, he made a vigorous case for the suppression of the Catholic Association, calling them facetious demagogues and ignorant upstarts. Now, very strong words, and in the meantime, the Catholic Association were still collecting monies to try and help their cause. Some of the parish priests in Tendergee, I know, did contribute some money to that particular association. And then a year later, in 1825, in the King's speech to Parliament, George IV called for the speedy annihilation of the Catholic Association. And subsequently, the government then implemented the Unlawful Societies on Ireland Bill, which meant that the Catholic Association was unable to meet. Now, whether this was deliberate or not, it also meant that the Orange Order were unable to meet as well. So for a while in the 1825, 1826, the Orange Order were a banned organisation as well. But in 1825, Charles Brownlow had a road to Damascus moment, and he made a dramatic U-turn in his thinking. So in a speech to Parliament on the 19th of April, Charles advised that his opinion had altered and that Catholics recognised the Pope only as their spiritual leader and nothing more. Now that speech did cause a lot of ripples. Charles Brownlow's U-turn caused a lot of ripples, and back home, people in County Armagh were outraged. And after his speech, Charles's effigy was burned in Lurgan, in his hometown of Lurgan. It was also burned in Armagh and the Moy. And after they burned Charles Brownlow's effigy in the Moy, they carried around an effigy of William Verner, shoulder high, around the town as a hero. So basically, a lot of people were saying William Verner good, Charles Brownlow bad is basically what was happening here. Now in 1826, a general election took place in County Armagh. There were 2 seats up for grabs, and there were 3 candidates. The first candidate was Henry Caulfield, the second was Charles Brownlow, and the third was William Verner. Now, Henry Caulfield topped the poll with 2,900 votes. Second came Brownlow with 2,500, and third came Verner with 1,900. So the 2 returning MPs to Parliament in 1826 was Henry Caulfield and Charles Brownlow. Now that didn't stop William Verner trying to scupper the Catholic emancipation. And in 1827, William Verner organised meetings in Bunburb and the Moy to petition Parliament against any concessions to Catholics. And these meetings were really the start of the organised opposition to emancipation. Now, one other slight coincidence, I suppose. Maxwell Close, who owned all of the land around Poyntzpass, his wife was called Anna Brownlow, but I have not been able to find out whether Anna Brownlow is a relation of Charles Brownlow. I'm going to blame COVID-19 on that because it has hamstrung me in terms of the number of my search. But it could well be that there may well Charles Brownlow may well have had a local connection to Poyntzpass through Anna Brownlow. Now, as well as these 2 local politicians, in January of 1828, the Duke of Wellington became Prime Minister, and his Home Secretary was Robert Peel. Now, interestingly, both these men were Irish, brought up in Ireland, and both were very strong anti-emancipation men. And by those 2 guys getting voted in, it meant that the concerns of Protestants were very much put at ease, because they knew that these 2 gentlemen would not allow Catholic emancipation. Now, locally in Ireland, Charles Verner and the others did continue to protest against Catholic emancipation. And one of the things that they did was to form these what's called Brunswick clubs. And the Brunswick Club was different from the Orange Order in that they primarily consisted of the gentry and had very strict rules. And there is James Verner, is William Verner's father. Some of you may remember James Verner had played a role in the formation of the Orange Order. But there was a Brunswick Club formed in Tandragee, and the president of the Brunswick Club at Tandragee was Lord Mandeville, and he had several vice presidents. They included Thomas Carter, Robert Harden of Harrybrook in Clare, William Lofty, David Lucas of Drummond Argyll, and Conway Dobbs of Acton House, as well as Colonel William Verner. They were all vice presidents. Now, according to the Newry Telegraph, the meeting in Tendergee attracted a crowd of 40,000 people. And Conway Dobbs from Acton House did make a speech in which he brought up the suffering of the Protestants in the 1641 rebellion, while other speakers advised that they were prepared to take up arms against Catholic emancipation. So I can understand why Conway Dobbs maybe did bring up that, because in the 1641 rebellion there were three men from Acton who died in the 1641 rebellion. But obviously that sort of a talk would have raised the hackles and raised the spirits of a lot of people who attended that. So in summary, in 1828 there were two very clear camps. There was Charles Brownlow, who was supporting Daniel O'Connell's Catholic emancipation, and then on the other side there was Colonel William Verner, who opposed it. Now, going back to Christmas Day in 1828, and basically the shenanigans. Patrons of both sides of the religion were drinking in James Wiggham's public house, and somebody called a toast to Charles Brownlow, and I guess in response somebody else said, no, let's have a toast to William Verner. Patrons got upset, a fight broke out, and it resulted in a man called James Bird being struck on the head with a loaded whip. And you can imagine, yes, people would have went to the public house with whips, because they had come on in their traps and whatever. But sadly, James Bird was killed and died at that particular event. So, interestingly, it was reported quite differently in the different newspapers. The Belfast Newsletter reported it that the trigger was a toast to Daniel O'Connell, but the Dublin Evening Post triggered that it was toasts to Brownlow and Verner. So I'll just read this here. It appears by accounts from different quarters that on the last Christmas Day, a number of persons, Protestant and Catholic, were drinking in the public house in the village of Poyntzpass, when party toasts were introduced. Some of the company proposing the health of Mr. Brownlow, and others that of Colonel Verner. This, of course, excited warm words, and from words they very soon came to blows, and the quarrel, we regret to state, had a fatal termination. A man of the name of Bird, a Protestant, who had attached himself to the Verner party, having received a deadly blow on the head with a loaded whip. He did not long survive the injury. An inquest was subsequently held on the body, and a verdict of willful murder, we believe, returned against 5 individuals, 2 of whom are Protestants and the remainder Roman Catholics, who have been all lodged in Down Jail. Their names are John Campbell, James McGee, John McGee, George Smith, and Andrew Taylor. So that was the sad occasion that happened on Christmas Day in 1828. Now, it did say in that press report that they took the prisoners to Down Jail. That would appear to be a bit of a mistake by the police, because most people would look at the canal and think that everything on the east is County Down and everything on the west is County Armagh. But if you look at this map and if you look at the dotted line, the actual county border runs means that the Orange Hall here and Clark's hardware store, or Wiggham's hardware store, is actually in County Armagh. So the incident actually took place in County Armagh. So the suspects should have been taken to jail in Tendergee or Armagh, as opposed to Downpatrick Jail. So now, as mentioned earlier on, that Robert Peel was the Home Secretary, And before he was Home Secretary in Britain, he was the Home Secretary in Ireland. And while he was in Ireland, he did set up the police, and he set them up in a very structured way, from a county to a province basis. And that model that Robert Peel set up was actually then replicated in England, and in fact a number of other countries around the world. So what it meant was that whenever this incident took place, there was clear instructions that the police had to report up to the county, and then the county had to report up to the province, and then report up to basically Dublin Castle. Now, the police barracks in 1828 would have been on what we know as the Railway Street. It would not have been called Railway Street in 1828 because the railway didn't exist. Maybe it was called Rathfriland Road, but that's where the police barracks was. And the police had to then report to the Chief Constable in Ballybot, and then the Chief Constable had to report to the Inspector General, Major Thomas Davy. Now, what I'm going to do now is read the report that the Chief Constable wrote to Major Thomas Davy. So, Ballybot, Newry, Armagh, 20th of December, 1828. Sir, I have the honour to state for your information that on the night of Thursday the 25th, a man of the name of Bird was murdered in the neighbourhood of Poyntzpass, bordering on my district, but not in the County Armagh. As it was the men under my charge and stationed in Poyntzpass, who, though repeatedly beaten back into their barracks and being eventually obliged to take a circuitous route to pursue them, succeeded in apprehending 5 of the offenders. I think it's my duty now to report to you thereon. I attended the funeral this day, and on inquiry, I found it to have originated from party spirit, the deceased being an Orangeman, and from the increased numbers which attended the funeral, and the spirits of exasperation which seemed to prevail, I dread the consequences which, equally fatal, may result from some act of retaliation, and which may keep alive a spirit of disturbance in this hitherto peaceful district. And that was then signed P. Brennan, the Chief Constable for Ballybot in Newry. So clearly, it was quite a thought-provoking letter that the Chief Constable wrote. And the first thing was to note that, there must have been quite a mob or a crowd that gathered here inside or outside the pub, because when the police arrested the men, they were unable to make their way back up to the police station. The police station would have been here. So they had to, maybe they had to cut across the fields to go back up to the police station in a circuitous way. And the second thing is that the policeman, had identified that this was a very peaceful district, and they were worried about any acts of retaliation that might happen unless this was sort of nipped in the bud. But they had arrested the men, so they did. I think they did the best they could. But as I said, their words were quite chilling. So let's move forward a few months to the Downpatrick Assizes in 10th of April 1829, and basically the result of the case was that John Campbell was indicted for the murder of James Bird, and he got 18 months imprisonment and hard labour. Andrew Taylor, who must have been involved in the fight in some way, but not for the murder, he was indicted for assault and sentenced to 12 months imprisonment. And then the other 3 gentlemen, case was dismissed. So that all seems quite straightforward. Things should get back to normal. But I just want to look at one other point on this particular on this particular day in Downpatrick. There was a number of other cases that took place, and if I'll just read here: Thomas Boyd and Moses Johnson for horse stealing were sentenced to death. and James Rogan, John McKenna, and others for stealing sheep. They were sentenced to 7 years transportation. So I'm just wondering, are these sentences proportionate? And maybe I'm applying today's standards, but if someone gets murdered, and they get sentenced 18 months imprisonment, is one thing, and if you steal a horse, you get sentenced to death. So that just does not seem to me to be quite proportionate in terms of the punishments.
Mommy told me to follow the address.
If somebody's not on mute.
Oh yes, we're expecting it. Yeah.
Okay.
We have laid in sausages and bacon.
Okay, I'll put everyone on mute there. Sorry about that, guys. Right. So that's it. The incident happened on Christmas Day in 1828. The case was heard in April 1829 on the 10th of April. So hopefully that means that things get back to normal, yes? And we go back to being a nice sort of peaceful village, and life goes on. So I just want to sort of call out a few things that did happen in 1829. And this is sort of some parallels with what's happening in Parliament today. In the background, the government were working away on implementing Catholic emancipation, despite what the Loyalists were doing in Ireland. And the Roman Catholic Relief Act received royal assent and was passed in April 1829. But more sort of closer to home, William Verner from Lisnabrag, our Union Lodge, got burgled. Terrible. I think there was a number of people from Poyntzpass involved in that. Yeah, we like our horses. If you steal a horse, you get hung. But it made the news that a stud horse visiting Poyntzpass was big news at the time. Now, there's also some of you may remember two people called William Burke and William Hare. Now, William Hare was originally from outside Poyntzpass, and he worked in one of the he worked along the canal bank in one of the lock houses. He lived in one of the lock houses, but by all accounts, he was a very fierce man. Now, he doesn't look fierce there in that picture compared to his wife. She looks fiercer, but he was a fierce man, and I believe he either beat a horse to death, or he was very cruel to a horse, and he was chased out of Poyntzpass. But he made his way over to Edinburgh, where he met up with his partner in crime, William Burke, and together the two guys became what was known as the Resurrection Men. And eventually, when they were caught, Hare gave evidence against Burke. Burke was hung, and then Hare made his way back home. And in April 1829, he was drinking in a pub in Scarva with his wife, and he was asked to leave. In fact, he was chased over the fields. Him and his wife were chased over the fields and told to clear out of Scarva. Also in 1829, there were a number of births. William Calvert, James Little, Elizabeth Reed, William Kelso, Jane Minnis, Mary Jane Melville, and John Convey. How do I know? Because in the 1901 census, they were all alive and kicking, and done very well because they were all in their 70s. So basically, life was going on. However, there was one other thing that happened in April 1829, and that was a marching band came up from Tandragee to Poyntzpass, and the marching band were playing party tunes, orange tunes, and there was lots of shouting back and forward with the locals, lots of fists being shook. There were threats shouted at each other. And after an hour or two, then the marching band made their way back home to Tenderagee. Now the police had attended, and the police did break it up, and there wasn't anybody hurt or anything. But the police were worried that they were going to come back the next day, because they said they were going to come back and take Poyntzpass. But the police were positioned for it to happen, but it didn't happen. So that particular incident kind of, thankfully, didn't further any violence as such. So life going on in 1829. Let me now introduce to you a chap called Arthur Wilkinson. So Arthur was probably born in Lochadain in 1775, somewhere in the townland of Lochadain. And he probably was a descendant of one of the first settlers in Acton, a Roger Wilkinson. Now, in 1873, while he was a labourer, Arthur packed his bags and went down to Dublin and joined the army. And while he was in the army, he fought in the Maroon Wars in Jamaica. He ended up in St. Domingo, where there was a slave revolt, which occurred in tandem with the French Revolution. And then the British used the occasion to fight against the French. So there was he did see lots of action, as you might say. But while he was in the West Indies, he picked up a fever, and he was discharged from the army in 1799. So when he came back to Poyntzpass, he married Elizabeth Wiley and had 7 children. And he got a job in Wiggum's warehouse in the coal yard. Now, the reason that I'm telling you about this is because Arthur was a key witness in the court case in Downpatrick in April 1829. And him being an ex-soldier, he would have been somebody of good standing, and therefore would have his testimony would have held good stead. And that's just a picture of his that's Arthur's discharge notice. So where did Arthur live? Well, I don't know, is the honest answer. And again, I'm going to blame COVID-19 for disrupting my analysis here, my investigation. We do know that he lived in the Far Pass, and we do know that his house backed onto the canal. So it could have been one of these houses here, or it could have been. And there's the on the left you can see the public house. And there's it could have been where the Orange Hall is today, that Arthur was living in. Because him being a witness, he was obviously very close to the action. So, another newspaper report in September the 25th, 1829, there was an arson attack on the home of Arthur Wilkinson. Somebody placed burning coals in the thatch of his roof, and neighbours, lucky enough, the neighbours were there to help extinguish the fire, because there were. Arthur was in Warren Point at the time, but his wife and his 7 children and 1 maid, I think, there were 9 people in the house, and they all escaped with their lives. But it could have been much worse because of that, because of the arson attack. So that would have had a major concern, not only for Arthur but for the entire community. And a few weeks later, the community got together and put up a reward to find out who was the arsonist or the arsonists. And you can see here there was an advert in the paper for this reward, and the money that was collected, you can see here, these are the people who donated monies to the reward, and it does go right across the community. There's the local Catholic parish priest donated £5. Right across the community, there was everyone donated to the reward money. Now, I don't think the reward money was ever collected, because I never found any evidence that they found the arsonist, because the whole thing went very quiet after that. But as I said earlier, this arson attack on Arthur's house would have had a major effect on Arthur and his family. And Arthur then did write a letter to the War Office in London asking for his fare and for land to go to New Britain, as it was called then. And Arthur did. The War Office did give him some money for land in Canada. I think it's roughly where he landed here in Simcoe County in Canada, but they didn't pay for his carriage, so he had to do that himself. But basically, he had got a note through his door as well, saying that he was a marked man. So I think that was the final straw after the arson attack, and then getting a note through his door identifying him as a marked man. He knew he had to leave, and he took the opportunity then to travel to Canada. I don't know who the culprit would have been or what side the culprit would have been. I mean, I think the arsonist could have been either, pro Brownlow or pro Verner. It's a bit hard to tell without any other evidence. Suffice to say, there was never anybody identified or caught for the arsonist as the arsonist. But the plea for help to the War Office was signed by Thomas Carter, William Fivey, and Conway Dobbs. And that is really it in terms of my story. Arthur and his wife left Poyntzpass with their 7 children and emigrated to Canada. There were no more incidents of this nature that I can find, and tranquility did indeed return to Poyntzpass. So before I finish, there's a few people I'd like to thank here. Obviously, Alan Clark, who was reared in the public house, for lots of information he was able to give me. Caroline Hudson, who's a descendant of Arthur Wilkinson, who I met through Facebook, and she was able to give me some more details about what Arthur did. A lot of the political information that I got was from Jared McAtasney's article on Brunswick bloodhounds and itinerant demagogues. And then there was various people who wrote articles in Before I Forget, John Campbell, Frank Waters, to name but a few, Helena Gamble. I pulled parts from all the various articles to complete this particular talk. So let me finish then by saying thank you very much. I am an amateur local historian, and I'm pretty sure there might be people on the call here who can correct some of the things that I've got here. But if you do have any corrections, if you can provide any further information, then please drop me an email. There's my email address, and this will appear then in print in Before I Forget at some point in the future. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to stop the slides and then pass back to Roy. Thank you, Roy.
Unmute. Thank you very much, you delightful talk. I hope everyone appreciated that, and interesting to see that the Far Pass was a recognized name sufficient to be in the newspapers as such, not really just a nickname as I thought perhaps it was of more modern times. So I did learn a little bit more. And again, I've often wondered why that little detour in the border between Armagh and Down occurred, as I say, to take in the Orange Hall and Clark's store, etc. I presume it was there a long, long time, and really the canal interrupted and just cut it off a little bit. So the border hasn't changed. Yes?
It's the stream that comes down through past the ball alley and then joins into the canal.
Yes.
It's where that stream would have continued on
Right.
before the canal was built.
Yes.
And it ended up as a sort of messy drain going through our side garden. And my father sort of canalized it sometime in the 1960s. But it literally used to run down the side of the house between us and Kearns's.
All right.
Did it have a name, Alan?
Well, I presume it's whatever. I don't know what the name for the upstream bit is, but presumably it's the same. And presumably it also is just one of many streams that have flowed into the old glacial overflow channel that made the bog that goes down the center.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that information. I'm now better informed than I was. The meeting is now open to everyone of you to ask questions of you of any aspect of the talk that raised your interest. So I'll pass it over to you again with thanks to you.
Yes, if you do want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and I'll see if I can ask or find someone who can give the answers.
Who's making the tea?
We'll pass around virtual cups of tea. Will that do? I see a question.
Sorry, not tonight.
I see a question.
Biscuits.
I see a question in from Cambridge, from O'Connor Daly in Cambridge. So why did the people get such lenient sentences? Does anybody want to try and pick up on that?
Well, you ask about lenient sentence. It's really the contrast between the two. We used to, again, this goes back to my misperceptions. You know, in the days of the Wild West and the Wild West shows on the television and Westerns and all that, you assumed that the fact that somebody got stolen for or hung for horse stealing was like an American thing rather than a European thing. Of course, horses were far more important then than they are today, but surely to goodness they weren't that important even in our society.
Or would it have been to do with the fact who owned the horse?
Pass. I could not answer that.
Hugh, just as a matter of interest, the deeds for the building of the Catholic Church in Poyntzpass were donated to the parish in 1798 by a landowner called Stewart.
Alexander Stewart.
Alexander Stewart, yeah.
Yes.
And that was handed over in 1798. So that was Catholic emancipation in the past early.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Good.
Yes, Plunkett.
You mentioned Alexander Stewart. Is that the Stewart family from Ards, County Donegal? Because they were landlords around Lawrencetown there, and they were identified with the Church of Ireland. In fact, when Reverend William Butler Yeats was rector there, he took charge when the rector left and went to Dublin. But if you're in Dunfanaghy, there's a memorial to the Stewart family. In fact, their home is now a Franciscan monastery. So I'm just wondering, did he own the property around Poyntzpass as well?
Good. Can I come in? Oh, maybe Frank's going to come in. Are you? Is Frank coming in?
No, go ahead, Barbara.
I was just going to say that there may be a connection with those Stewarts, but the Alexander Thomas Stewart of Acton, his family had come from Ballintoy. They had land at Ballintoy and then inherited the land here. But there's probably a connection somewhere.
I imagine so.
You mentioned too earlier there about connecting between the closes and the Brownlows.
Yes.
I have been into Monaghan a few times. I know that the closes are very closely connected with the Monaghan Church. But there's if I recall correctly, there's a stained glass window with Master McGrath in the Monaghan Church.
Sorry, Richard, you're breaking up a bit. I can't really hear what you're saying.
And in the Monitor Church, there's a stained glass window with Master McGrath the dog, which I think is connected with the Brownlows.
Okay, yeah.
There is a connection between the Brownlows and the Closes.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting. It's interesting that you know, they were burning Charles Brownlow's effigy, and yet the Orange Order have a headquarters in Brownlow House.
That's right. Yeah.
Only in Ireland.
Yeah, indeed.
Frank, do you know anything about Maxwell Close's wife, Anna Brownlow? Have you come across that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
I know nothing. So I don't know anything about that. That came as completely as news to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was connected. I thought at some stage that Maxwell Close was connected with the Brunswick Club, but it obviously wasn't a major factor in it.
Okay. Maxwell Close obviously knew the Brownlows because they used the same architect to build Banner House and Brownlow House. That was John Mayfair, the architect Mayfair. So maybe there was other connections as well. Yes.
But in the church, definitely is that window with the Master McGrath, and I think that's connected between the Brownlows. The Brownlow owned Master McGrath, you know. No.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Richard.
The Greyhound, you know, the Master McGrath, the iconic Greyhound at that time.
Yeah. Has anybody ever covered Master McGrath in any of our talks? Barbara, do you know?
Andrew Halliday might have. I'm not sure. It has been mentioned. Richard is right. We just can't hear you very well, Richard.
You're not sorry.
But you're right. There is a connection.
Yeah.
Yes, Andrew gave us a talk, Barbara, and he mentioned the relationship there between the two, and also the Master McGrath and the stained glass window at the back of the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say, well done, Hugh, not just for the talk, but for pioneering our first Zoom talk. Well done. And very, very good to have Alan and Margaret and their lovely photographs, those old photographs of the Far Pass. Thank you very much. Very good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed, you. Very good.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks, Hugh.
Hi, Hugh.
Good to see you, Margaret and Alan, as well. I worked with you, Margaret.
Hi there, Richard.
Remember I worked with you for a while in the City Hall?
Yeah, I did.
Years ago.
Good times. They were good times.
Certainly were.
Yeah, the one thing I'm upset about tonight is that I found out that I'm a County Armagh girl rather than a County Down girl. It's really, really upsetting. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I always thought I was a County Down girl.
Well, Hugh, we're going to take our leave of you.
Okay. Thank you, Niall. Okay.
Bye-bye. John, Frank.
Bye-bye, Niall.
God bless.
Bye, Niall.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Niall.
Seamus, can I ask Seamus Daly to... Seamus, can you take off your glasses and just flick your hair? I want to see if you look like Daniel O'Connell. I think you do.
I thought that Daniel O'Connell looked like Peter Kay. That's what I thought when I saw.
That could be right, yes.
Can't see the screen now without the glasses.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I'm happy to leave the call open if you just want to chat away. But otherwise,
Hugh, can it be seen? Can the video be seen again for people who weren't able to make it?
That's my next technical challenge. And I just realised I haven't hit the stop button, so everyone is still on the video. So if you just all give a big smile and wave before I hit the stop button.
I would have been in earlier, but I couldn't get the car parked. I was looking to get a space. Go to next Thursday night.
That's your excuse, Francie.
Hugh?
Yes?
Do you want to mention next month's talk, all being well?
Yes, please. Can you go ahead, Barbara, with that?
Oh, well, just all other things being equal, Plunkett Campbell is going to give us a Zoom virtual talk on the mill houses. Plunkett, you tell us what you're going to give us. Plunkett?
Basically, Barbara, I will be developing or relating the history of the linen industry in the Upper Bann Valley and the contributions that were made to it by the mill owner in Guildford and how everything revolved around him. And then also the influence of the Quaker movement. The Quakers arrived in Moyallen in 1675, so we'll give you an overview of their contribution and the technological developments that came about as a result of their influence in the bleaching of the linen. So basically that's it.
Lovely. Thank you, Plunkett. We'll look forward to that.
And hopefully.
Have we got a date for that talk?
First Thursday in April.
Okay, fair enough. There you are, first Thursday in April. Look forward to seeing you all again then.
8 o'clock.
All right,
yes.
Barbara, is that Easter week or before Easter?
Before Easter.
Before Easter. No.
What is before Easter?
No.
Is that Monday, Thursday?
It's fine. That deal's fine. Sorry, one other question I have actually. Does anybody think that Poyntzpass should advertise themselves as helping to advance the medical profession? In that our own William Verner, you know, help advance. Maybe not.
No.
Maybe not. No.
You better not.
That might be a grave mistake, Glenn.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. I tee it up and Francis kicks it.
Yeah. Into touch.
Shot one up.
Well, I know I am going to call today now, and thank you all again, especially you, for a very interesting hour. So look after all yourselves and look forward to being able to meet you all in face very soon, hopefully. Thank you all. Bye.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Bye.
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 Take care, everybody.
Well done, everybody.
Bye.
Well done, Steve.